Well, it's 1969, okay, all across the USA. It's another year for me and you, another year with nothing to do. Last year I was 21, I didn't have a lot of fun, and now I'm gonna be 22. I say oh my and a boo-hoo. It's 1969, okay, all across the USA. It's another year for me and you, another year with nothing to do. It's 1969, baby. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to or back to Writer's Record Collection. My name is Carl. That was 1969 by the Stooges off their debut album released in 1969. And this is a thread that used to be a contest, but I missed the deadline for the contest. But this is my favorite year in music. And if you figured it out based upon the song that I picked, it is 1969. From a statistics point of view, out of the 400 something albums that I have, most of my collection is albums from 1969. I love the run from basically 68 to 71. I think that's a prime time in music in 1969. I have more albums from than any other year in my collection. So according to the statistics of my collection, my favorite year in music is 1969. This contest was originally put on by the Vinyl Pasta, who I recently found out lives in Florida as well. But since I missed the deadline, I like the questions. I'm going to make it a thread. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 1969. I'm going to show some albums and explain to you or show you why 1969 is my favorite year in music. And to do that, I want to talk about a little bit of history of 1969 because there were a lot of big things that happened in 1969. We put a man on the moon for the first time. Charles Manson killed the idealism and the hippieism of the 1960s with his murder spree, or his conducted murder spree. A bunch of hippies showed up on a field for Woodstock, which was the first biggest concert of its kind. The Beatles played their last show together. Nixon became president. Stonewall happened, and just all sorts of things happened, and culminated in what I think is a lot of really good music. I mean, CCR released 3 albums in 1969. As I mentioned, the Beatles played their last concert in 1969. So a lot was happening history-wise, politically-wise, and that transferred to a lot of really good music from 1969, in my opinion. So this thread has 5 prompts. I'm going to show a little more than 10 albums, all of which are from 1969. And without any further ado, we will get into it. So the first prompt in the first album I'm going to show is an overrated album. And I'm going to go with an album that is not a bad album. It's actually a very good album, but this is Tommy the Who. This was released in May of 1969. Like I said, this is not a bad album. It's the first rock opera of its kind, and for that reason, I think it's a bit of an overrated album. It's got a movie made after it, which isn't necessarily the best made movie, and I personally don't think it's the best Who album, but it is very good. It's one of the albums that sucked me into music and albums as a whole, and there are some very good standout tracks on this. The Overture and Underture, and I Say to the Blind, Cousin Kevin, The Acid Queen, Do You Think It's Alright, Pinball Wizard is the single from this song, Smash the Mirror, Tommy Can You Hear Me? I mean, it's really good, and it being overrated is not to say that it's not good, but an overrated album from 1969 is Tommy the Who, and I only think it's overrated because it's not the best Who album, and I don't necessarily think it's the first rock opera of its kind. I think there were other albums that were hinting at that before this actually came out, but not to say it's bad, I just think it's overrated. Tommy the Who. The next album, the next prompt, is an underrated album, and this is The Kinks. The Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society, released in January 1969. The Kinks do not, in my opinion, get nearly enough credit in rock and roll history. These guys were a phenomenal band. They were the most staunchly British of the British invasion due to the fact that in the 60s they were not allowed to tour America, so they didn't pick up on a lot of the American influences, but this is a vastly, vastly underrated album. A lot of people don't talk about this, but there's not a bad song album. I mean, the track listing is Village Green Preservation Society, Do You Remember Walter, which is one of my favorite songs on this album, Picture Book, Johnny Thunder, Last of the Steam-Powered Trains, Big Sky, also a great song, Sitting by the Riverside, Animal Farm, Village Green, Starstruck, Phenomenal Cat, All My Friends Were There, Wicked Arabella, which is just a super cool song, Monica, and People Taking Pictures of Each Other. This is so good, and I recommend this to all my friends and anyone who's willing to listen to it. But this is just a vastly underrated album from 1969. The Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society by the Kinks. Phenomenal from start to finish. Not a bad song on it. The next prompt is a comeback album from 1969, and although this is not the definitive comeback album for this artist, this is Johnny Cash at San Quentin, and the definitive comeback album being Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison. I do consider this a comeback album for him. It's in that string of comeback albums that he made that helped put him back on the map in the late 60s and early 70s, and this is a great concert. In my opinion, it's just as good as Folsom Prison. I need to get another copy of Folsom Prison. Unfortunately, I don't have one, but Johnny Cash, San Quentin is a phenomenal comeback album in my opinion. He started a riot when he played here. The end of the record is, the last song is Folsom Prison Blues, and the inmates got so fired up that it ends with them running off the stage. You could hear the footsteps and the chaos basically that's about to ensue. And great comeback album. I think it's in the same vein of comeback albums as Folsom Prison, but if you're not willing to take that, I will show you another comeback album, in my opinion, by a phenomenal female singer, and this is Janis Joplin. I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama, released in September of 1969. This I consider a comeback album because this is her first album after leaving Big Brother and the Holding Company, and I think Janis Joplin without Big Brother and the Holding Company is a much more... I feel as though Big Brother and the Holding Company held her back. This album allowed her to do things that the holding company wouldn't allow her to do, incorporating horns and things like that. And this and Pearl, I think she shines way more than she ever would have with Big Brother and the Holding Company. So a comeback album for Janis Joplin is I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama. Fantastic album. This is with the Cosmic Blues Band, the Pearls with the Full Tilt Boogie Band, but just maybe is a great song on this, along with Somebody to Love, which is one of the most iconic Janis Joplin songs ever. So a comeback album by Janis Joplin and a comeback album by Johnny Cash. So the next prompt is your favorite debut album from 1969, or my favorite debut album from 1969. And full disclosure, this was a tough one for me. There are a lot of great debuts in 1969. Some of them you're going to see again later on that would have made it, but the one that I ultimately had to go with went on to be one of the biggest bands in the world for their time, and that is Led Zeppelin with their debut album, Led Zeppelin 1. I mean, it's essentially a cover album, but it is a phenomenal cover album. This was released in January 1969, and just the track listing on this is phenomenal. Good Times, Bad Times, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, You Shook Me, Dazed and Confused, which is just one of the most iconic 1960 songs ever. Your Time Is Gonna Come, Black Mountainside, Communication Breakdown, that's punk rock before punk rock was even a thing. I mean, 2 minutes and 26 seconds in 1969 is just mind-blowing. I Can't Quit You Baby and How Many More Times. I mean, this is phenomenal. And to me, the greatest track on this album is Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. That is a stunning, stunning building blues rock song with just Jimmy Page and the whole band shining. So my favorite debut from 1969 is Led Zeppelin 1. But like I said, this was a hard one for me, so I've got to give some honorable mentions to some other great debuts from 1969. And the next one is going to be the Allman Brothers, their first album, the Allman Brothers Band. This is Beginnings. This was released after the success of At the Fillmore East. This is their first two albums, Idlewild South and the Allman Brothers, packaged in one thing. But the shining track on their debut is Whipping Post, just a epic 5-minute song. It's even better on Fillmore East, but another great album from 1969 is the Allman Brothers Band, the Allman Brothers Band, and that was released in November of 1969. And I got to give a little more credit where credit's due with another great debut album. These guys went on to make a string of phenomenal albums. Their first three albums are great, and then the brains behind the band, Carlos Santana, decided to go a little jazz, but this is Santana's debut album, released in November of 1969. And it's just, I mean, the cover art's amazing, and this whole album, it's side one is Waiting / Evil Ways, Shades of Time, Savior, and Django. Persuasion, Treat, You Just Don't Care, and Soul Sacrifice. I mean, this is just, for a debut album, it's one of the best debut albums of all time. It was between this and Zeppelin 1 to compete for the best debut in 1969, but Zeppelin's got to get it because this stands up, but Zeppelin is timeless. This is a staple of time. Zeppelin's timeless, but Santana's first album, the Allman Brothers Band first album, and Led Zeppelin 1 are all my favorite debut albums of 1969, and they're all phenomenal. And this next prompt is an album that you wish you had on vinyl. I am not a huge Frank Zappa fan. He's a little eccentric. I think he's a great artist, but he's a little too eccentric for me. But I do really like that album, Hot Rats, which was released in October of 1969. So if I could find a copy of Hot Rats, I'll go ahead and pick that up. I don't need it enough to buy a repress or a modern day repress, but if I ever walk into a record store and there's Frank Zappa Hot Rats sitting there, I'll go ahead and pick that up. That song Peaches and Regalia is a very cool song, but I really like the guitar sound on that album. So Frank Zappa Hot Rats is an album that I would love to pick up on vinyl. And the sixth and final prompt are 5 of your favorite albums from 1969. And this was easy because this is a lot of the other things that I would have picked for other albums, but 5 of my favorite albums of 1969, and number 1, I gotta kick it off with none other than the wonderful, fabulous Abbey Road, released in September of 1969. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. If I could be deserted on an island, I'd have a copy of Abbey Road. I think this album is flawless from start to finish. It's phenomenal. There's not enough things that I can say about this album that hasn't been said. I mean, the track listing alone is just mind-blowingly good. It's the Beatles at their finest. It's the last release they ever made, and it's, in my opinion, their best release. Come Together is a great song. Something is a beautiful song. Maxwell Silverhammer, Paul McCartney, getting very poppy. Oh Darling, great blues song. Octopus's Garden, again, a little pop. But I Want You, She's So Heavy. That, I think, that's grunge in 1969. I mean, those heavy guitars and the way that it builds and builds and builds, I think that's what grunge would eventually become. Here Comes the Sun is a great song. You Never Give Me Your Money, Sun King, Me, Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, She Came Through the Bathroom Window, Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, The End, and Her Majesty. It's just, side 1 and side 2 are flawless, and the medley on side 2 is just, the way that they strung all those songs together in fragments and made one big long song is just, it's mind-blowing to me. Phenomenal album, one of my favorites of all time, and one of the best of 1969. This next one is one that would have competed for one of the best debuts of 1969, but unfortunately got beat out. But this is the Stooges, their first album, the Stooges. This does not belong in 1969. This is a mid-70s punk rock album that could be around in the 80s and possibly even the 90s. I mean, this album is great. This album, the song 1969 is what you heard when we came into this. Iggy Pop was obviously very bored with 1969, although I'm enthralled with 1969, but it is just so, so good. We Will Fall is such a weird song, and then, I mean, all of it's really good, but I Want to Be Your Dog, side 1 is just, it's punk before punk was even a thing. It's super, super good. One of the best albums of 1969. One of my favorites is The Stooges, self-titled The Stooges. And I need to get more of The Stooges in my collection, but only one I have right now, and in my opinion, they're best. Next is an album by one of my favorite bands of all time, and an underappreciated album that could have been an underrated album in 1969, but that is The Doors, The Soft Parade. I think this album is really good. I mean, this is lush. This is just super, super 60s, lush, overdone, decadent. You can hear the drugs that were flowing through the speakers. It's so good. And I mean, they had an orchestra and horns, and a lot of Doors fans didn't like that, and even modern Doors fans for some reason don't talk about this album enough, but I think it's great. But The Soft Parade, the 8-minute and 40-second song that closes this album out, that should be on the level of Bohemian Rhapsody in my mind. I've talked about that quite a bit, but that is just a phenomenal song along with a phenomenal album. But Tell All the People, Touch Me, Shaman Blues, Do It, Easy Ride, Wild Child, Runnin' Blue, Wishful Sinful, and The Soft Parade. A great, great album from 1969, and another underappreciated album from 1969. If you haven't heard it, I recommend checking this album out from start to finish. It is super, super good. And we're down to the last 2. The next one is going to be the Rolling Stones with the epic album Let It Bleed. I love the Stones when they do that down, dirty country that they did in the 60s and 70s. This is my favorite Stones album in my opinion. I think this album's phenomenal. There's not a bad song on this album. It's Let It Bleed, Love in Vain, Midnight Rambler, Give Me Shelter, You Got the Silver, You Can't Always Get What You Want, Live With Me, Monkey Man, and Country Honk. Another just epic album from 1969. I can't say enough good things about this album or anything that hasn't been said, but just mind-blowingly good. And last but certainly not least, Zeppelin's going to make an appearance with Led Zeppelin 2, another just fiery, epic, awesome album from 1969. This was released in October of 1969, and it just simply put, it's awesome. There's not, it's just awesome. I mean, it's so good. Great from start to finish. It's got such epic tracks as Whole Lotta Love, Heartbreaker, Livin' Lovin' Made, Ramble On. I mean, it's just another 1969 album with not a bad song on it. So I hope you all enjoyed. Again, this was a contest that I've turned into a thread. I really like the questions. I really like the prompt, and it's funny doing this. I'm realizing that a lot of my favorite albums are albums from 1969. I mean, those last five, they're mind-blowingly good, and they're the albums that I continuously listen to every day today. So 1969 is my favorite year in music. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please sort of like, if you like the channel, please consider subscribing. I will have some more content out for you guys soon. I'm gonna do some more stuff pertaining to the 60s, gonna do some more gear stuff coming up. So until the next time, I am Carl. This is RYDER'S Record Collection. Spin some wax, have some fun. Cheers.